Welcome to another episode of the Create Smarter podcast. I'm Phil here today with Connor and Kyle. Gentlemen, how you doing?
I'm ready to rumble.
Feeling a little punchy.
Ooh.
Oh, look at these two. We are here today to talk about the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight, not the results of it because it was a snoozer, but the implications of what that fight means for streaming and for your own live events and some of the lessons learned. So first and foremost, did you guys watch the fight?
I did. I watched the whole card, actually. I watched all four fights, and I thought they all varied in entertainment level and professionalism. But, yeah, I tuned in.
I watched them as well, but I will say I was colored me surprised because I thought it was just going to be Tyson versus Paul. I didn't realize there was an undercard. I was there to watch a streamed fight.
Yeah.
So when I realized that, no, this is the pay-per-view approach. There's going to be a long time. There's going to be unnecessary interviews. There's going to be microphones not working where Holyfield has a microphone pointing in his face because he doesn't know how the microphone works. Yep. Fun surprise, but I also did go to a bar to watch it, which I probably shouldn't say the name because I'm pretty positive they don't have the correct rights to all this stuff. But yeah, I went to a bar to watch it with buddies.
It's an interesting debate, and I have a bunch of numbers here, but one of them is about bars, and they estimated like an additional couple million bars tuned in or something like that. So it's hard to quantify that, but like I think they were anticipating that would happen. A whole nother ball of yarn when you talk about some of the streaming services and how they restrict themselves from being pulled up through distribution software and switchers and things like that. But just to set the stage, you guys are not alone. I did not watch the event. I tried to. I tuned in around like 9 o'clock. I was like, oh, whatever. It's a spectacle. I want to be part of the zeitgeist. I want to see what's going on. And the little counter in the bottom left said it was like 2.5 hours till it was going to start.
The card starts.
It was the Royal Rumble of counters. It really wasn't a good timekeeper. It just kept happening.
Guys, I am going to sleep before this ever starts. But a couple of numbers. You're not alone. Many people watched 65 million concurrent streams.
That's
at its peak.
Period, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So at its peak, the most people that were watching at once were 65 million concurrent streams, 38 million concurrent streams in the U.S., so a huge international audience.
Wow.
Netflix says that 60 million households tuned in live to watch the fight. It peaked at 65 million concurrent streams. 50 million households watched the co-main event, which was the fight you mentioned between Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. Largely probably because they didn't know that it was going to be happening.
Yep.
No disrespect to them, but that's not what was billed. The event was billed as Tyson Paul, so people probably tuned in and said, well, I'll leave it on until the fight happens. Another metric which might not shock you, but 56% of all U.S. TV viewing between midnight and 1 a.m. Eastern was for that fight. I actually would have expected that to be higher. And an estimated total viewership number of 125 million viewers. Now, what I want to know about that is, am I counted in that because I tuned in for a minute? And the answer is yes.
Right.
I tuned in probably for about 3 minutes and was very disappointed in what I saw and tuned out, but I'm probably counted in that 125 million, which is another way of saying, are these numbers real?
Dude, I bet they might even count the people that just saw the ticker on Netflix. Like the way that
the autoplay.
Streaming, the autoplay of just like, oh, it started to play because someone had their Netflix up because their kid wanted to watch Trolls
or
3.
Or it's a Friday night and I'm
wasn't
gonna
paying attention.
Put on a show before I go to sleep.
Like, do they count that? Like, that's one of those things where you look at the numbers because, like, on one hand, you'd be like, I was at a bar, there was at least 100 people in there, and that counts as one household.
That's one stream,
so you're like,
right.
Sometimes the numbers can be flawed, but on the other hand, it's like, did they count just the fact that was their main like banner splash page on Netflix, and it autoplays now, especially on Netflix? Did they count that as a viewer?
Right. And I mean, part of it is I wouldn't have popped into Netflix that night if not for that fight happening. So there definitely was a huge draw. I mean, like, they're billing it by far as the biggest live streamed sporting event ever, exclusively live streamed. So I didn't look up those numbers specifically, but like Amazon Prime has done like the Black Friday football games.
Yeah.
Thursday Night Football is now on
playoff
Prime.
one.
Peacock
I was interested. That was like the first thing. I was like, what? How did the NFL do? Because
But I
the
think,
NFL is movers.
So the NFL did a live streamed game. But there were local simulcasts, I believe.
Was it? I thought the Peacock game was only on Peacock.
I thought local markets were able to carry it, but I could be wrong about that. Which would obviously for sports, a local market is going to dominate, and that's going to make up a huge portion of it. But all this to say, like, obviously wildly successful. Another crazy stat. ESPN's YouTube channel highlights from the Netflix fight with credits to Netflix are now the highest viewed clip on ESPN's YouTube channel of all
Wow.
time.
Ugh.
And
That's a weird.
That's Logan Paul. Oh, it makes us influencers
so it's just it was definitely, I mean, it's successful, obviously. What is this? But all people talked about for the next couple of days was how bad it was. So what is the legacy of this fight and what does it mean?
bad on two fronts too. Like, it wasn't just a bad fight. Like, we can talk about the merits of that. I mean, I'm not a boxing guy, so I don't really know enough. But I mean, watching it was painful. My stream continued to chop out. It would get about a minute, it would cut out. And like, I left the bar during the undercard fight that I heard was amazing. The female fight was supposed to be amazing from what I hear, but
It was controversial.
I left because the bar just kept losing the stream. And I was like, why am I sitting here watching them try to reload the stream as bartenders who don't care about trying to fix this?
Or else
went
trying to
home.
work.
And then by the time
that
I
too.
finished it was just one of those like, damn, I'm still watching this. I'm going to try to make it work. But I had to restart my Netflix like 5 times, I want to say, during that fight.
Yep.
And like, that part was more eye-opening to me of just how bad they handled the streaming aspect of it.
Right. And, they had to be anticipating a large audience. So, for it to perform that poorly, they can look at it one of two ways. They can say, oh, it's such high demand, it crashed our servers. Or you can look at it and be like, well, you weren't prepared. And I think bandwidth generally is something that people just don't think about in this day and age. Tip number 1 for people who aren't producing a Netflix event, bandwidth matters. And, if you're going to be delivering an event, you're lucky enough to have a really large audience. No matter what service you're on, there's an upper limit to how many streams how many people are allowed to be streaming it at once, and when that's going to start to top out and cause you problems. But don't you think they should have been prepared for a really large audience?
From what I understand from reading, I'm sorry, Connor, I'm like not letting you talk about it.
Yeah. No talking. Oh, you guys should fight, and we'll sell it to Netflix.
Yeah, we become influencers quick.
Yeah.
It was AWS, Amazon's their services that actually failed. Now the question is, was it on Netflix to be like, hey, we need to bulk up our services, we need more servers, we need this type of stuff? But like you say, for the everyday user, I mean, it's going to be extremely rare that anyone's getting 65 million concurrent viewers for their conference or something like that. But it does talk to like that experience and how frustrating it is with stuff like, just think about a Zoom where people like, oh, we can do the 100-person Zoom or we can do the 500-person Zoom. The reasoning why you probably want to always kind of shoot a little bit higher, overestimate, is because of that user experience. For a lot of people, is this going to push them off Netflix sports? I know WWE's going to Netflix. What's going to happen there? Not that it's going to have anywhere near the same viewers, but like, user experience does matter. The trust people will have really is that kind of, you have one shot to kind of knock it out the park. It's business 101. Like, first impressions are what matters. With how many people experience this, how many of them are looking forward to what the future of streaming holds for live sports?
Or for any event, not just sports. They'd say, oh, live streaming. How many people that we're going to talk to now who had a passing experience with live stream be like, oh, I don't want to live stream. Netflix couldn't get it right. How can you?
Right.
I think I was going to say that goes with the trust aspect. Is you look at Netflix as one of the biggest conglomerates of all time in streaming, and when people see that word, live streaming and streaming a movie is completely different. That's what people don't really think about. So I think a lot of people went in and were blown away that the only thing they could talk about the next day was how bad the streaming was on the biggest streaming service. So I think anytime you bring up that word now, it's going to be like, oh, remember that one? Yeah, we do remember that one time, but we don't do that. It's very different, and we're prepared. But as well, I was going to mention even recently, back to the bandwidth conversation, is we did an event and something that we didn't think about, not streaming wise, but captions, we were doing that, and the bandwidth did come into thing. So if you're planning an event, you were saying get that extra, just think about the extra 5, 10, whatever it may be, just for backups, that you might not even need because we needed to upgrade on site to save our production.
Yeah, the specific example you're referring to, we were on site producing live captions across 9 concurrent rooms, and there was just a miscommunication. Luckily, we do testing days, and we ramp all this up, so we were able to catch this before it was in production. Another thing that Netflix might have done is some stress testing. But there's a miscommunication about bandwidth per room versus total bandwidth, and the on-site internet vendor had thought that we had been referring to total bandwidth, but what we had been referring to as bandwidth per room.
Big difference.
And we had left buffer, so we were able to get to about 4 rooms when we need to get to 9 because we had left buffer, but we needed a total of 45 megs, and they had given us 5 megs. And then we tapped out, very quickly there, obviously, but we saw that in our testing. Now, for a live stream, you mentioned the difference between live streaming and streaming. A live event is significantly more difficult to deliver streaming than an on-demand event. The on-demand event is already uploaded onto a server. It's already there. All it needs to do is be delivered back down. A live streaming event has to go both ways. It has to go up and it has to go down. It has to be processed in real time. The data constraints on a live streaming event are completely different than on an on-demand stream.
But if I had to guess, I think the Tyson fight was closer to a streamed event. I'm sure that there doesn't seem to be any indication of the fact that it was all there, and then people did watch it. The upload was fine. Like, I think they stress test that they did
That's
that.
what
It's the download to everyone's home, and
It's
that
that
server
point to
trying to
point.
send 6 million of this stream in 4K and stuff like that. That was impossible. But like you say, this is. It's all. This is Klingon to most people, and this is really what makes streaming very difficult, right?
But that's what's important. It is a foreign language to most people, and what matters to most people is when I tuned in, the little circle in the middle of the screen spun. I got frustrated, and there's all kinds of studies about how long people are willing to wait, and it's shockingly slow. Now, if you care about the Tyson-Paul fight, not to mention if you gambled on the Tyson-Paul fight, which obviously a lot of people did, which is a terrible idea to gamble on a boxing match, especially one that was clearly scripted.
A sparring match, from what I've heard.
But this is something people wanted to watch and had a vested interest in, maybe even financially. Your conference, or your event or your commencement or whatever it is, the desire for large swaths of an audience to tune in is going to be much lower than this entertainment event. So, like, the time that people are going to be willing to refresh their Netflix to get rid of that spinning, and ultimately that's all that matters. Is it working or not? They don't care why. So you have to be stress tested.
And also, I mean, we can put this caveat out there. It also is like people's internet speeds. I mean, it's like as much as you as the producer, the person who owns the show can make sure you've got the best upload speed, make sure you're getting down there, make sure you have enough bandwidth that like anyone that can pull this can see it. At the end of the day, if this person has a garbage internet speed, if they're watching it on their phone, if they have zero reception, like there's stuff you can't control as the producer, which can be frustrating for a lot of people.
Right. And you talk about influencers. Let's say, I didn't see any examples of this. Let's say that there is some big influencer who happens to be trying to watch from their phone in an area where they don't have good service, and they have a bad experience, and they post online, Netflix streaming didn't work for me, and it sucks. And they
Dave
post.
Portnoy was one of the first ones.
There you go.
I mean, X went crazy with all the hashtags just because he's like, oh, it's only going to get worse from here. And everyone's like, well, yeah, you got to blame Netflix first. That's their first thing.
Right.
Is blame the thing that's giving you the product. Not maybe your Wi-Fi router stinks, man. Maybe you have 20 people at a party all on their phone and it's destroying the.
Or maybe he's out in Nantucket and the
he's on his
internet
boat,
is crap because you're on an island.
Yeah, but if the first thing you're going to blame is that product, not your own
streaming
thing.
sports sucks.
Exactly. So if you're watching a
Instead of-
conference from home that you could you couldn't attend in person, you're going to be like, well, this stinks, and then log off faster than.
Right.
Like if you're at a party watching the Tyson thing, you just keep it on because you're eating chips and guac in the other room.
Right. But it's important to know, as long as you as the person putting it on can understand upload, can understand download, can understand those aspects of it, it does help you to be able to explain it or at least have the peace of mind at night, right? No one at Netflix was sitting there being like, oh my gosh, what happened here? They were pretty quickly were able to pinpoint it's the AWS. They didn't have enough servers to be able to pull it down because it was a universal. All the users had an experience that was an issue. So you're able to kind of look back and be like, well, it wasn't just like the right influencer had a really crappy internet thing.
No, it was everyone.
This was a shared experience.
Everyone. So they were able to do that stuff. And that's why it's important to kind of understand that, but it's really difficult to understand it.
So I have a bunch of stuff I want to talk about. Next up is the production itself. Leading up to the fight, they had a studio show set up in the stands. No disrespect, I don't know who the host was. I only tuned
Kate
in
Smith?
for 2 minutes. Possibly
Used to be Kate Abdo.
a British woman.
Yes, Kate Smith.
Leading
She
this
does
panel with another co-host who I didn't know, and then
Cedric the Entertainer.
and then Evander Holyfield and
Lennox Lewis.
Lennox Lewis, thank you. And it was a standard. Now this we can really relate to because this is the type of content we produce all the time. A 4-person panel, 5 cameras, live switched, very simple, nothing crazy. what a disaster.
It was terrible. Yeah.
I mean, an abject failure. Nothing was working. And you have to just wonder, sometimes when we produce these shows and it goes clean, you just want to be like, can someone give us a round of applause? Yeah. On one hand, you're like, yeah, it's really challenging, and this should be proof that it's really challenging. And on the other hand, you look at them and you're like, I can't find the data of how much Netflix paid for this fight. I'm sure it's in the 10s to 20s, maybe even up to like 100 million. They paid a lot of money for this fight. How do you not get this right? They have earpieces, IFBs, that are not working. They have mics that are not working. They have a host, their technical director is cutting to the host when she's looking off camera to her producer, trying to fix some of these issues. So they're showing her panicking and showing it not working. Again, not her fault. She's trying to get it right. It's up to the technical director to not show her in that moment.
This camera cannot be used
and cover her while she's trying to solve this problem and figure out, what can I go to? Nobody cuts to a pre-recorded video. Nobody gets away so they can solve the problem. If our team produced a show like that, I would be so upset.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the biggest production of the year. How does that happen?
Live events are hard. I think a lot of it seems like it was people kind of like showing up and trying to be more on the fly. Like you had these influencers, you have people who aren't confirmed to be showing up and stuff like that. I think there's also trying to like build in time. Like, again, I've never produced a boxing event, so don't really understand the whole, like, what has to happen in between fights that you have to kind of kill time with. That could be very difficult. The IFB, the stuff like that, like, who knows? Maybe it was just like Holyfield showed up and some producers like, yeah, get Holyfield on there. This would be great. It's a Tyson fight. They like, maybe it wasn't planned out. I mean, there are elements that, yeah, you want to be able to capture that energy, but then you kind of struggle. So there's reasons why a lot of times we go very hard on, like, we want to run a show correctly. We want to know who's going to be here, when they're going to be here, why they're mic'd up, all that type of stuff. Yes, you want to have fun. You want to have that excitement of what's in the air, but at the same time, you cut corners. All of a sudden, you got Holyfield with glasses bending over trying to listen to, like, speaking to a mic, has no idea what's happening. You got your host turning off camera, has no idea what's happening. I mean, this is where good producers, why you want to put the work in it ahead of why prep work matters so much.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say, I mean, we talk about having backups, not only for, maybe get a different IFB, different microphone, but have a backup, something to roll. Have hey, we have this random package that we don't need to show, but if something goes wrong, throw to a 3-minute package that the people watching home would never know what's going on.
Yep.
At least have the host hard camera, and now we're gonna throw it to this blah blah blah. We'll get back to
TV 101
in 5 seconds. Yeah. And
TV 101,
and you would never know. But the fact that they're like, well, better just sit here and suffer. Everything's going wrong.
It's insane.
Yeah.
If I'm the director of that show and my prime guest can't hear what's happening, I'm in the ear of the host. Maybe the host didn't have an earpiece either.
Fair.
I'm in the ear of the host, or if she can't hear me, I'm holding up a sign that says throw to video.
Yeah.
And the host is going to throw to a video, and we're going to get Evander Holyfield a new IFB so we can hear Mike Tyson's primary rival in history that everyone knows about give thoughts on the fight. Yeah. That was the one. Here's what the other thing I'll say. You talk about like filler and all of this, and that doesn't really matter. It's not the fight. That's when I tuned in. And that's when hundreds of thousands of other people tuned in, and it was crap, so I tuned out. If I tuned in 2.5 hours early and I was like, this is entertaining and good, maybe I stick around and see some of their ads that people paid for. But I'm not going to do that if it's terrible.
I mean, I don't want to say okay boomer to you, and I'm as old as you are, so there's no reason I would be able to say that to you.
I'll say it.
I mean, with Twitch, with these influencers and stuff, isn't it more of that style of content that currently is kind of becoming more and more popular, of this kind of like something's recording and you get to see the flaws and all because of authenticity. I mean, this is sort of a way they're going. I know with
if
you,
you're
just
watching
like,
for 60 seconds, not if you're asking me to watch for 2.5 hours.
But these Twitch streams go on for 4 hours. They go into this. I mean, what was it? Katai during he did the Mafia.
Kai Sanat just finished like a
I ruined
2 month long.
Say Settlers of Catan. I would watch
he just did like
that.
2 month. But I think to your point is, I think it's what you sign up for. Again, you're going to blame the
Is that what people signed up for?
No, this is what I'm saying. If you go on to Twitch,
if
you go on Twitch, you go on to Kai Sanat, who's a funny entertainer and he rolls with issues, and it's like, you're like, whatever. Yeah, exactly. Small production. If you're going to Netflix, because no one's going to think AWS. No one's going to think they hired 5-2 Productions to put this on. They're going to think Netflix put this on. Joe Netflix is out there with the camera, and they're going to be like, whoa, what the heck? Because it's just different worlds.
Different.
Well, you got the
but I do agree with the
people that are
content,
coming because it's Logan Paul probably are like, yeah, this is, I totally
Wait, which
understand.
Paul, bro?
Jake,
yeah.
I don't know,
Oh,
the
okay.
Paul brother, one of the blondes that probably did something horrible.
There you go.
If they tuned in because they're like, I like this influencer, I've been following him, they probably didn't find it as offensive as the people who are Tyson followers who are used to pay-per-view.
Right. I think that's the thing too. Is
Right,
it
it's
not
also
only
like
makes
an
Netflix
interesting
look bad,
difference.
it makes boxing look bad.
right.
And so
True,
these
yeah.
guys are making all this money off these kind of stage fights and all these random companies popping up. Is like the actual sport itself is suffering, and they're the art is suffering. So if somebody who was a big boxing fan tuned in, went to a thing with their friends, whatever it was. By fight number 1, number 2, the host messing up Holyfield, he's like, I'm not watching this.
Yeah.
I'm shutting this off. But I don't even care about Tyson. The legend of the sport I love. I'm not going to watch this.
But on the flip side, an entirely new subset of the population is getting exposed to boxing as an entertainment event because of Jake Paul. Stats. Okay.
Statman.
Stat boy.
$18 million gate in person revenue at AT&T Stadium.
Yeah,
The 9th highest gate ever for a combat sport in the United States. 9th highest ever. Okay, so $18 million of in-person revenue. Reportedly, Paul gets paid $40 million and Tyson gets paid $20 million. Netflix stock immediately jumped up 3% the day after the fight, the first business day after the
shocking,
fight.
yeah.
And then it's only continued to go up since. I don't know if they might have had an earnings call or something, but it's only gone up. It's gone up like 200% in the last month, which is
wild.
basically the time since the fight.
Wow.
So the business of this is good.
Yes.
And if 65 million people tuned in, they're not doing that even if it's Tyson versus, whoever. I don't even know who the big real boxer is these days. I know who Jake Paul is because I am alive on Earth.
I was going to say, during COVID, didn't they do Tyson versus Rory Jones Jr. or something like that?
I don't think Tyson has fought in like 20 years, so it must have been someone else.
I think
No,
Jake Paul's fought others.
No, I know Jake Paul has, but Tyson did fight during COVID.
I thought he
they
hadn't
showed the
fought
reel,
since
and
2005.
he was one of the ring announcers down there with the real guy, the girl and him. But they showed that, and what I'm saying is, even that was his big comeback fight, whether it's an exhibition and nobody cared or whatever.
Maybe that's what it was.
It probably didn't do the numbers this did at all.
No.
And that was during when everyone's home and there was no gate.
Yeah.
So
it's
that just goes to show.
Oh, we're watering down the product, all this and that. I'm a big hockey fan, and hockey is, it's the 5th, 6th sport right behind soccer even and everything else. And there's often this attitude of like there's a little gatekeeping going on of like, we don't, it's ours and we want it to be pure. Like, why are you trying to appeal to this mainstream audience? Well, the sport is going to thrive if a ton of money is coming into the sport.
Doesn't matter who watches,
And
new or old.
So get the money in and then worry about fixing some of the junk, and like, so I would push back a little on that. The other point I want to make, we talk a lot about is hybrid events, right? And I think sometimes people get confused about what that means. In this case, it's a hybrid event. There's an in-person component where 72,000 people went to AT&T Stadium in Dallas and 65 million went home. The experience at AT&T Stadium may have been fantastic. I have no idea. The experience at home needs to be catered for the people at home. That's a hybrid event. And I think when you think about your own events, if you're putting on a conference and a live stream, first of all, the first thing people say is, if we, do this streaming, nobody's going to come. Okay, well, is there a draw to come? People wanted to be at AT&T Stadium to see and be seen for this fight. You don't have Tyson Paul, fine. What is your draw to get people in person? And then what does your production look like to make that a special event for those people versus the people at home?
Well, it's like you say, your draw is the conference, right? The draw of a football game is the football game. In between, do they go crazy? Like, they might have some cheerleaders. There might be a fun little game and stuff, but they don't really go too crazy about the in-person thing because the draw is the draw. I'm here to hear this conference. I'm here to hear these keynotes. I'm here to have these education. I'm here to network. For the virtual viewer, I think that's something we see a ton is like, well, yeah, we put up a camera. We'll just stream this conference. It's good enough, right?
Bad
But
experience.
then they keep going. This doesn't work. And I think like we talk about a lot. How do you approach it like a broadcast production? I think things we've talked about are like influencers, having sidebar panels. When you're in a conference, you're able to sit there and witness, cool, they're bringing the chairs off stage. They're switching this stuff. I'm fine with this. I get a little bit of a break from listening. I can do some stuff because I'm sitting in a chair. There's nothing else for me to do.
Yeah, there's nowhere else that my attention can wander to.
Right. At home, you're talking about second screen experience. You're talking about commercials. You're talking about all the things that you have to deal with. And it's the same thing when they're watching a streamed event. So it's how do you keep their attention in between those aspects of it? Without ads, without the things that people are just willing to accept, like, yeah, cool, there's commercials. I get it. I get this amazing product on a television, and I get to watch it from my own like living room because of this. When you're streaming conferences, I think this is where you talk about how do you make sure that you are creating content to keep the online person engaged in what's happening, and that's more tailored to them. When you go to the studio stuff, if you're watching a football game, you don't get to hear Romo talking. You don't get to hear what's happening. Like, you get a different experience watching versus being there in person. And I think that's something when we talk about hybrid of what we try to say is what is that virtual experience? You have to put time and energy into it. You should be bringing in people who can talk about what they just heard, or people who can kind of talk about what the viewer would potentially want to hear to make it enticing for like, hey, yeah, I don't want to spend X number of dollars to go here or travel, but I really would love to watch it. And oh, wow, you also have this influencer, this podcaster, this subject matter expert who's talking in between. Like, that's really cool. This is like something like I'm experiencing like I would if I was watching a sporting event.
Right.
Also, it doesn't need to be the full conference length.
That's what I was going to say.
Right?
As well.
It's a television. I mean, let's talk football, right? Football is becoming brutal because it's becoming 4 hours. Baseball, flip the script.
I was going to give the baseball example as a perfect one of how the disconnect for hybrid kind of works. The TV numbers are terrible because the games are too long. So we institute all these rules to make the games go quicker. The in-person experience, I'm paying a lot of money. I want the game to be long as hell.
Right.
I want to be able to sit there and chat with my family and friends that I went with. I want to, go get a hot dog. I want to be able to walk around and go, at Yankee Stadium, go to Monument Park. I want to go to different parts of the stadium. The stadium wants me there longer because I'll buy an extra beer if I'm there for an extra half hour versus if the game's a half hour shorter, but the TV numbers are lower. So like, if you're doing a conference, you can get around that by maybe not doing everything live or delivering certain things only on demand where you can condense them down. So like, that's a great example. I was going to make that same point. The craziest thing about this is just the money that goes into this. I think it's just no matter what you think about the product and the experience and how good it was or how bad it was, the money that gets tossed around for this and the rights that the amount that streaming services are willing to pay for big name marquee events, the numbers are crazy. So it's not going anywhere.
I laugh because you sit there and say like how much like if we did this, I'd be so mad that like all those technical issues are happening. But at the end of the day, the real money people are like, we're up 3%. We're killing it. All the stockholders, everyone's excited. Even though like as a producer, we're like, you got to be kidding me.
And the presenting sponsors were DraftKings, Celsius, Experian, MetaQuest, and Spaten, a Brazilian beer. Spaten?
Delicious.
Anyway, five presenting sponsors. Do you think they care that
Their
Evander Holyfield's IFB didn't work? They care that the number says 65 million concurrent streams, 125 million viewers. And so the money's going to get poured into the next event too. And this is just going to continue happening. And then the quality will probably continue to go down. And, who knows? Maybe they'll
I think it's going to take a huge revolution from the viewers because I'm looking at the upcoming, the doubleheader on Christmas for football.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, what are you going to do? Not tune in?
Yeah, right.
It's like, oh, okay, well.
And then you get left out.
No, yeah. And the also thing is some of people who might be interested, did they improve? I want to watch it to see what got better. But if it doesn't, you're going to be like, oh. Well. So it's going to take a couple times of not a good product. But if they knock these out of the park, we'll see. I mean,
I'll take the optimistic route and say, like, the more reps people get, the more experience they get, the more lessons learned. As much as like, wow, it's not really going to affect the people being like, oh, we got to put more money into this. I think it still is the skill set is relatively newer. As much as broadcast television's been around for a century or for a while now, not centuries. That's stupid. I think the more reps we get with like these types of events that are streamed help more and more, help the engineers, help the net, like all the networks and all that stuff. I think it will get better. I don't think it's going to kind of continue going crappy stuff.
Just to put a bow on it, because I did find the stat. The estimate is that 6,000 bars and restaurants in the U.S. tuned in to the tune of 1 million additional viewers. That sounds low, although it was late at night.
Yeah. I mean, in
6,000 bars? That seems low.
I mean, I went to a townie bar where they're like, yeah, we got Netflix. We can turn this
and
on.
as you wonder how they're calculating. Do they know the IP is a business as opposed to a residential? You know, it's. I don't know how you would even go about calculating that.
Especially because it's Netflix. I think that all they could do is the people who've paid for the rights to like be able to stream Netflix in their bars.
I don't even know. Is that a thing?
I think it is. Like, I don't think you're technically allowed to.
The numbers that were those are the numbers that they put out. So anyway, well, thank you guys. This was fun. I really enjoyed this conversation. Excited for the next one. And thank you for tuning in to the Great Smarter Podcast. I'm Phil. That's Connor. That's Kyle. Thanks so much. We will see you next time.